What were the SZOL education disaster stories from your school? A kid asked what popping a cherry was. And the teacher, who was a big burly idiot of a guy, bluntly said when women lose their virginity, they bleed all over the bed. And cherries are red. Absolutely mortified expressions washed over the face of every girl in the class. And I vaguely remember one girl saying not happening. Full stop. Apparently some of them complained to their parents. And the next day he had to clarify. But with the most sarcastic only some of them do explanation. My mom was on the PTA at the time. Said some of the parents lost their shti. Another time, one kid asked why his balls hurt when he squeezed them. And he said because you're squeezing them. Don't do that. Catholic school was a trip. In 9th grade, they separated all the guys and girls in our year for sex ed. The guys got your typical Catholic school-esque sex talk about abstinence and going blind if you masturbate. While us girls got to go grocery shopping and bake cookies for the boys. We never did get a sex talk. And the next year. I'm sorry. What? How did that decision get made? Today we'll teach the boys to be ashamed of their dicks. And we'll have the girls make them bake treats so they feel a little less bad about it. What will we teach the girls? We won't. The teacher set a DLDO directly on the desk of the girl in front of me. I believe that's called PTSD. The separated boys and girls. The teacher for the boys let us do open Q&A anonymously on index cards we put in a box and he would answer them out loud. He spent most of the time going through them in front of everyone going, not gonna read that one. Not gonna read that one. If woman has starch masks on body, does that mean she has been pregnant before? We pretty much learned that the balls get hairy. Somebody asked how two women can have sex. The 60-year-old female health teacher told us that vaginal fisting is the standard method. Complete with a demonstration for how to perform fisting. I have never once fisted a vagina. I must be doing lesbian sex incorrectly. Someone link me better examples. Once in 7th grade a girl asked if you could get pregnant by a screwdriver. Not exactly sex ed because I had to go to a Catholic school. But all of us boys got banned less than 5 minutes into our puberty talk because two kids joked about a poorly drawn diagram of a penis. We were told we were gonna have a presentation at a later date. Never did. This was in the late 90s in public middle school. The school held an assembly and brought in a group of these weird bodybuilders talking about sex and God. One of them tried and failed to rip a phone book in half. I don't remember much about it except they took a volleyball net and stretched it out so the holes got really big and said something to the effect of "this is a condom." Imagine how easy it would be to throw a volleyball through that net. Not hard. Right? Well, condoms are made to protect sperm from passing through. But the AIDS virus is much smaller than sperm, and just like a volleyball through this stretch out net, it can get through much easier. Edit. I'm shocked this was such a popular trend, or maybe even the same group or power team. I just remember being appalled at the religious, abstinence only and anti-science messages. At my school the teacher talked about an LSX to preserve virginity. And an L stimulation in men. Now I realize she was really open to a lot. As if God, the almighty, all-knowing, all-powerful creator of everything, looks down to see Debbie taking her umpteenth cock up the ass and thinks, drat. Another one who outsmarted me. Do these people really believe it works like that? I often wonder. Meaning, do they really think they can trick God with a loophole like that? Do they believe it's not sex if you get naked with a guy and suck cock for all it's worth and then let him come in your ass and therefore you're still pure? Really? One guy in my class kept fainting when he saw any private parts. Dumbest theory. Man was missing half his blood so he kept getting a boner and then passing out from lack of O2 to the brain. They simply decided to stop teaching sex ed my year. No explanation. Once we even asked the health teacher, hey, are we ever going to get sex ed? And she goes, do you guys really want to learn your vaginas and all that? Yes. We did. On a totally unrelated note. We had 6 student pregnancies in my last couple years of high school. And almost 10 more before the kids in my class turned 20. Wild how that happens. The only sex education that we got in my school was a 2-week course during our biology class. I lived in a pretty conservative part of Texas growing up, so our sex education was basically just about abstinence and a few of the really gross STD pictures. Our biology professor showed us a live birth every year. The worst part is that it was a video of her giving birth to her son. I never want to think about my teachers who her especially while giving birth. I remember in year 10 some people came to our school for sex ed. They put the boys in a separate classroom and then talked about how to use feminine hygiene products for an hour. To a room of 15-16-year-old girls. I later learned from my friends that to the boys they talked about nocturnal emissions. Great job. Whichever organization that was. The teacher forgot to put sound on for a birthing video, so he rewinded it. Watched a doctor shove a baby back into a woman's vagina by the head. The sex ed teacher had a bag full of goodies, as she put it. I pulled out a DLDO and some kid said, "OMG, what is that? I swear I've seen one of those in my house." Edit. I like how everyone is talking about the DLDO and not the fact someone's mum has been hiding a DLDO badly from her son. Boys and girls were paired to put condoms on bananas. One at a time. Fun times discovering who was proficient and who less so. Immediate chaos as some of the girls turn out to be quite talented at it. I was trying to put the condom inside out on the banana. It wasn't working. And my partner puts her hands on mine and helps me fix it. I remained seated after class was dismissed. My 8th grade health teacher was a bit of a disaster in her sex ed unit. She could not say penis or vagina, claiming that while she knew they were the right words, they were just too uncomfortable for her, so she went on about the male part and the female part. To avoid talking to us too much, she had us watch mostly videos about things like puberty, STDs and do these fill in the blanks worksheets. She showed us a perfectly serious educational video called Gonorrhea. No clapping matter. She did an open Q&A in which she disclosed, despite claiming she didn't want to, that she was infertile. One of the guys also managed to get one of the popular girls to ask her what's a necrophiliac. Is that, like, a good thing? To the teacher's credit though, she actually answered that one straight, though she kind of loathed the room for a minute after. The sex ed teacher came into our class and was telling us how your testicles would shrink into your body or descend away from it in an effort to keep the sperm at a healthy temperature. A kid asked, "So our balls have minds of their own?" The classroom teacher, not the sex ed teacher, said reflexively, "You can say that again." Most of the class didn't understand what the teacher meant, but one kid laughed so hard he threw up. Weird times. When we were in 8th grade, we had the sex ed teacher come in and talk to us. She showed a picture of a normal penis, like one of those see-through pictures that explained each part. Well, in that it showed the balls. The teacher explained what they do and why you need them to impregnate a woman. She asked if there is any questions. Suddenly my friend Alex raises his hand and asks, "Let's say that a boy only has one ball. Could I still have kids?" And that's how we all found out Alex only had one ball. My school brought in Pam Stenzel. John Oliver did a bit about her once. She told all the girls in the audience that they are like a piece of tape and that the more time the tape was used, they had sex. The tape would lose its stickiness. They would no longer be attractive to men. Basically said women who have sex outside of marriage are worthless. The crazier thing is this seemed normal at the time. We were about 15-16 and our tutor, that weird chemistry teacher with jokes that aren't funny, came in the morning to our class. Gave out condoms. Started telling all about it, and then he opens a briefcase and puts a DLDO on a front desk. Not a disaster. But my health teacher said, "Boys, wrap it up. Girls, keep your knees shut." We went to a performing arts school. In hindsight, it sounds like she was just encouraging the guys to all participate in gay sex. I was at an all-girls Catholic school. And the scheduled time for sex ed, mostly puberty info, was during bio. Our teacher was a really young guy who was super sweet but also painfully awkward. He'd just sit at his desk while the female nurse came in to give us the talk. Well, the nurse was kind of old and she didn't realize that she was using a Sharpie to draw on the whiteboard instead of a marker. Long story short, there was a giant diagram of a vagina drawn in red on his whiteboard for months. His face when he realized it belonged on the watching people die inside subreddit. I ask because I always see sex ed on TV shown as the students always shocked and disgusted as the teachers do this perfect rundown of a lesson. When I had sex ed, our teachers were very uncomfortable and vague with everything and just ended up skipping the entire thing altogether. We were at our hormonal prime, so might have been nice to know a thing or two. My first encounter was in elementary school, 6th grade, I believe. They separated us by gender and gave us the talk. The instructor was talking about genital hygiene at one point. I was genuinely confused when I learned some folks still have that extra bit of skin on their dicks and need to take extra care to wash up. I went home and for the life of me couldn't figure out what I was missing. Later on, PRN taught me what an uncircumcised dick is. Grew up Mormon. Dad says one is a lock. The other is a key. Mum says sex is sacred. Any other info was beyond enlightening. So sex ed was taught by a woman named Ems. Payne. It was a pretty standard lesson, minus her drawing the menstrual cycle in Sharpie on the whiteboard. The absolute horror though was finding out that she ran in the same social circle as my dad at a Super Bowl party. For years, my dad threatened my sister and I with dating her if we didn't behave. Very young female health teacher with long fake nails extremely flustered while demonstrating putting a condom on something dick-shaped from the sculpture studio, Arts High School. After a few tries with us laughing she goes, "Come on. You all know how to do this." Pregnant girl pipes up, "Miss, I clearly do not." That's a girl with wit and humility. I just find it wrong that the girls and the boys were separated. The boys were taught how to put on a condom. The girls were taught how to prevent rape. Yuck. To all the people in this thread saying they never got sex ed, don't be afraid to ask anything or are too afraid to ask or are no stupid questions. We'll be happy to answer your questions about sex, protection, stees and pregnancy with honesty and without making fun of you. We had a teacher actually staple condoms to the pamphlet about safe sex practices. I went to a private Catholic high school and in health one day we were learning about STDs. The teacher decides he was going to play a video on VHS about a couple of them instead of discussing it in order to do some grading. 3/4 of the way through the video it completely cuts to a 90s PRN with the woman moaning and being plowed from behind. The best part is the teacher had his headphones in and it takes a good 30 seconds before he notices us all laughing and promptly jump up to shut it off. The class was small so we all agreed to not bring it up since the teacher was super chill and didn't want to see him get chewed out by the administration. We had two people come from a local community college who had the brain dead idea to put on a play about STDs and RPA in front of a bunch of 11-year-olds. When they were finished, they said, "Okay, any questions?" And the kid next to me raised his hand and asked if he could use a balloon as a condom. Those two college kids never came back to our school again. My teacher for sex ed was super old, telling us all the classical stuff. How is sex like a BBQ? Edit. I regret asking. Catholic school. They told us ahead of time that at the end we could anonymously ask questions, so as little 6th grade girls we all discussed who was going to ask one question ahead of time so we could get the max amount of questions in. No one would raise their hand to ask because they never separated the boys and girls. Anyway, one girl asked what vaginal discharge was, a normal and healthy thing, and the teacher said that vaginal discharge is very bad. He really emphasized it, and that if any of us have it we need to go to the hospital immediately because we could have serious health risks. He was a doctor. He still teaches sex ed there. 10th grade. Catholic school. The health teacher added instruction on how to give a good blowjob. Secondary school. We had a visitor come in and talk to us about school health. We were crammed in a pretty small room. Chairs in neat rows. Things were fine. Fairly light-hearted and educational. Right up until the STD slideshow starts. She pulls up a picture of severe genital warts and the guy behind me immediately projectile vomits chocolate milk all over himself and his row. I have emetophobia, so everything was kind of a blur after that. But I have vague memories of about 30 teenagers trying to book it out the room at the same time. And this guy was just sitting there covered in chocolate milk puke. A puddle of it around his feet, looking like he was contemplating drowning himself in it. Felt kinda bad for him. But it didn't stop me bringing it up every time I bumped into the guy for the next 10 years till I moved. Our biology teacher said if someone says that the condom broke, they are lying, and proceeded to grab the condom in both hands and stretch it till it was like 6 foot long. I mean, it's a good demonstration. But I can tell you from experience they do break occasionally, so don't rely on them as being 100% effective. Also, my eldest is a good kid. Wouldn't want it any other way, ha 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 ha. The sex ed person at my school stretched a condom over his head and said something like, "He says he's too big for a condom. You run." We had to practice putting condoms on a genuine DLDO. Unconfirmed, but heard a girl in the other class got a detention for putting it on with her mouth. I am a teacher and teach elementary school. At our age group it is basically name the parts education. I had one student when we were naming the parts go. My dad drives one of those. We were at Volvo. We weren't allowed to have sex ed because the school is in Texas. You couldn't swing a backpack without hitting a pregnant girl. One of the girls I graduated with was pregnant with baby number 2 at graduation. I went to high school in the Bible Belt. So naturally our sex ed was basically abstinence or you will get pregnant and die. During sex ed the 2 health teachers got fired because one got the other pregnant and they were both married to other people and they were caught in the act. In a classroom. By a special needs student who was traumatized by the event. In 5th grade. We were given a pamphlet that covered basic sex ed topics that we were supposed to take home to our parents. A friend of mine got really upset, offended at it, and vowed to throw it in the trash. He had never come across as an uptight fundamentalist type, and I'm not sure what had made him so angry. Boarding school in Denmark brought in an outside zoologist, still dubious on the qualifications. She spent most of the time talking about how great sex was interspersed with brief, sudden clips of straight up PRN. She ended the talk by explaining that the use of condoms is strictly optional. As long as you get checked for STDs once or twice a month. Our science teacher pulled her aside afterwards. And subsequently gave us the angriest sex ed lesson ever taught on planet Earth. Needless to say, she was not invited back. At the end of the class, a teacher wanted the class to play a sperm race game on the smart board to explain the parts as we were seeing them. One of the more popular boys, who had in the previous trimester gotten a popular girl pregnant, volunteered to play in front of the class. He was the first one to make it to the end of the game and won. Then put his fist in the air and said, "It's not the first time I've won this game." Everyone erupted into laughter. Iconic. When we were 12, 38 years ago. Yikes. Our sex ed covered the usual birds and bees stuff. How to put on a nodder, etc. They also cover childbirth. And the ancient massive Philips VCR was wheeled out for some gore from the ankle's end. Sure enough. Out comes the placenta as an encore. And one wag pipes up. "Miss. Is it true you can eat that?" Comma. And immediately a lovely girl called Joanna projectile vomited across the whole projector room. Bless her. I nearly passed out. We had an anonymous question box. Like where kids could slip questions and that they were too embarrassed to ask out loud. A good idea in theory. But the science teacher, sophomore biology if you can believe it, in charge of this exercise clearly didn't understand female biology very well. So anyway. Some kid put a question in the box that asked what the term pop a cherry meant. The teacher then proceeded to go into this clumsy and incorrect explanation of what it meant to break a hymen, which most people misunderstand anyway. But the way he explained it was that there was like a pocket of blood or something that popped when punctured by the penis when a woman has sex for the first time. I got all hot and dizzy and needed to leave the room.